And at first I was a little hesitant because I had to realize that I didn't really know what the hell was going on in Executive Towers. I mean, I lived there 5 years, and on August 4th, when I got that email about get out in 4 days, I didn't know what the hell was going on. And then to view the conditions that my fellow tenants were living in was very, very hard for me and very heartbroken. And because my apartment's intact. Sean's been there, some other people in the room have been there, and I'm not aware of anything that's going on. I mean, not that I was secluding myself, but I was totally, I knew the building every now and then it rained, yeah. In the basement, yeah, okay, they need to fix the roof. But to see what had actually took deep deterioration was very shocking to me. And I found myself in a position that I did not want to find myself in. Having to have to do something, having to have to say something. I mean, I'm a 70-year-old retiree, thinking I'm going to live out my golden years. I'm going to watch the news, bitch at the TV, but I'm not necessarily going to be up in arms about anything because I've had my day and I've had my time. So I found when I was doing this presentation, I had to kind of explain who I was and how I got here and why it makes a difference to me, because I very easily could have packed up in that last 30 days and got out of there and found me an apartment, not look back. But I found that there are some very key and core reasons why I'm still in this fight, and I'm committed to this fight. So, how did I get here today? I'm sure some of you have been reading this, words to describe a multi-dimensional person. And how I am and how I came to be is how I was reared. I had both a wonderful mother, very caring, but I had a father that would fit this description. He was almost an enigma as well, and most people use the term enigma as being mysterious and hard to understand, but it really is still a compliment. And I think his life journey impacted me in terms of how I got here today. So this is my father, McKinney Chapman Jr. As you can see, that young man up there in the corner graduated from Wade High School, wanted to be an artist, got his portfolio sent to New York City to a prestigious art school in New York City. They asked him to come up there. They were given stipends and scholarships. He took the train from Toledo, got up there, and they realized he was colored. And they turned him around and basically told him, we don't accept coloreds here. And while your art is wonderful, unfortunately, we can't accept you. That young man took the train back to Toledo, inevitably enlisted with the paratroopers and served in the Korean War. Came home and decided that he was going to be a postman, because that was pretty much the segue. And he began to carry mail in the city of Toledo, on Toledo's east side for 30 years, 28 years on the same route on the east side. But being the creative person that he was, because he still was an artist at heart, he decided, because my sister and I were in school, my baby brother, not being able to afford health care then, decided that he was going to design a mini postman uniform and take my brother out on the route with him in this mini uniform, designing the hat and everything. And as you could see, it made national and international news and even made the jet. And then, because he was our artist, in an effort to get kids to mail letters to Santa Claus, being the artist that he was, he created these three-dimensional papier-mâché characters that you see here that Station A on the east side put up every single year. Although he was committed to doing the 40-hour week for his family and everything, and I watched his pain and his desire to still be a creative individual, He was still very, very, very angry, but he wanted to put his anger in more positive constraints. So, what did he do? He created a Christmas display of 24 elves that spanned over our neighbor's house, completely out of paper mache. They all moved. My mother would cringe every time he needed a motor, because that meant the motor was going to be missing, or this coffee pot motor or something was going to be missing, and clothes hangers from the dry cleaners would be twisted and folded into these three-dimensional moving characters. And he did this Christmas display for 25 years on Bronson in North Toledo, and people came from miles around and rode up and down the street just to get one side of the other, and this was his outlet for his creativity. I mean, it was in the Blade every year, you know. The funny part was he started out with Santa and a couple elves, and then we came home from school one day and there was a colored elf in the kitchen, and my sister said there's no such thing as a colored elf, and my father said, have you ever seen an elf, period? So that's how, so we became very diverse. He created different characters. We had a hillbilly that was pulling the Model T Ford up the hill. We had a Hispanic person that, Fuentes, that was pulling on the other side. We had a paratrooper he called Pontius Pilate. And the story was that out of his own creativity, that they were coming to our house and Rudolph hit the tree and there was an accident. And so you have Dr. Elves and you have Rudolph moving his head up and down. And at the window, you got this guy, Santa Claus, turning his head on the inside and looking back, and his arm moving up and down, telling everybody in the yard to be quiet. My favorite elf was Tuffy. Tuffy had a double-barrel shotgun with a sign that stood next to him that said, "Keep out, accident ahead," okay? This was all the creativity of him moving forward and turning a negative into a positive, and no matter whether he was colored or not, wanting to give the joy of his art to Toledoans far and wide. And so this was his creative situation. But as we all know, in the 60s and the 70s, things didn't really get any better. Even though he was doing his 40-hour week and doing all his creativity, he then had to become an activist. And I watched my father in my grade school years, where he used to always tell me, if you are not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. And he went on to be the founding member of Black Pride Incorporated. He was a Black Panther who helped with the food drives and the clothing drives. He was a board member for Lutherans for Human Dignity, which is an interracial group that he helped found to ensure that we could have faith-based dialogue and etc. He was a founding member of ABLE, on the ABLE Committee for Advocates for Basic Legal Equality. He was also a part of the original board of the Toledo Fair Housing Association. And he constantly worked with community leaders, and he helped organize the historic Scott High School walkout. He was very, very concerned and active with what was happening in the Waite High School protests that was going on. Went to battle many times with the police chief, ended up as part of the police and fire community board to make sure that there was open dialogue and etc. And then the reason why local Black, African, and now multiracial artists are being housed in the art museum, because he fought the art museum for 2 years, basically threatened the art museum that if they didn't have a meeting with local leaders, he was going to spray paint the marble black. Trust me, they flew in from all over the world to make sure that that was not going to happen. So here's a man who started out wanting to do the right thing, who started out, still wanting to be creative, and then found his passion through activism. As you can see, there's some various pictures. He was in the Old West End Crier. They did the groundbreaking for Drew Hill Medical Center that was going to help inner city. And he formed various groups talking about racism as a bias, and then spoke out in terms of Black pride and education. He was on the task force to help the Toledo Public Schools decide correct history, and reviewed those books, and they were approved by Toledo Public Schools. And this just goes on to show you a little bit more activity. My household was a busy household. I watched my father in awe, even to the degree where we knew that the FBI, our phone was bugged. It used to be a joke in the house, be that the phone would ring 3 times, and then they would stop ringing, we'd pick it up, and people would be on the line because we knew we were bugged, and etc. But I watched this man, this multi-dimensional person that helped shape who I am, and in my beliefs that at the same time you can fight racism, you can fight for human dignity, you can fight for various causes, you can just fight just because you don't want to be a part of the problem. You want to be a part of the solution. So this is just a real quick bio on who I am and what I've accomplished, and I went to, the funniest story I want to tell is, after my father was doing all that fights in Toledo Public School, in 8th grade, I announced to him I wanted to go to private school. So he was like, you want to do what? I'm doing all this fighting for Black kids in public schools, and you want to go to Notre Dame? It's like, okay, do you want to go to Notre Dame? But when I got to Notre Dame, trust me, the nuns were quite surprised at, my attitude and me pushing forth African American studies. I mean, you don't get to be class president on the junior board, and senior class president, talking about wrong things, just talking about right things. And so I formed a group called Black Youth in Action, which was all the Black kids that were attending private school, a whole 40 of us at that time. I'm glad to see the progress that's been made. But as you can see throughout it, I've been very, very, very involved in a wide variety of issues, and it is in my core, but I really thought at 70 years old, I was going to be able to just sit down, and the old thing, like when Kennedy was assassinated, the torch is passed. But I'm still involved with DSA, and I just got asked to be the vice chair for the housing committee we're going to redevelop. And I'm still working with Policy Link and just a wide variety of things. So I'm a little bit more quieter as you get older, but I'm still involved. So when the thing happened at Executive Towers, as much as I wanted to sit down, I couldn't. I just couldn't just pack my little stuff up and say, don't bother me. I got my deposit, I can move. I had to stay and fight the good fight. So unfortunately, this is where the saga continues for me. So let's talk about how this all began. I'm going to pass around. These are the actual documents that the city of Toledo presented to Executive Towers in July. So, a lot of people think this all hit first week in August. No. Actually, there were May notifications, June notifications, and then July notifications. And the July notifications was the water leaks, the roof, and some of the other conditions concerning apartments and common areas. And these violations were noted and presented to them, and as you see, that happened. All this is unbeknownst to the citizens, because the tenants, because even when they decided to place the notices on the door, Denison removed the notices. So we didn't even know that the building had been served with those notices. What we got on August 4th was a letter that basically said, be out in 4 days. The explanation was plumbing. No, They were violated for plumbing. They were violated for leakage. They were violated for the roof. They were violated for housing situations. They were violated for a lot of areas and tenants' apartments that were inhabitable. I immediately called Councilman Williams and immediately called the press. Let's get this out here. Let's figure out what's going on. And that's when the ball really started rolling. I think Dennison thought we were going to go away quietly, or people were going to pack up and move. But, of course, that did not happen. And so what happened as a result of that? We get a retraction letter the very next day that basically says, never mind. Never mind what? Never mind that we have to move. Never mind that everything's going to be A-okay. Never mind that you're going to fix it, or what? I mean, you know, this letter said absolutely nothing. And the one part I really love is the fact that in the first letter, they told tenants if they did want to move, they would get their full security deposit and they could keep August's rent, only to find out here months later that they did not get their full security deposit. They did keep it for various situations. Some tenants even got their deposit kept because of damages in the apartment that were water damages because of their negligence for the last 3.5 years that they had been taken charge of. So what do? Well, first of all, of course, you know, the city, I think Christina and Fair Housing and Abel and everybody wanted to get together so that we could have a forum to try to explain to tenants exactly what their rights were. So we met at the library, you know, that was a meeting. Obviously, that was a very good resource-oriented meeting, but as a tenant, it really doesn't give you any solace to know what your next move is going to be. You know, did you walk away saying you're going to pay my rent? Did you walk away saying you're going to help me move? Did you walk away saying you were going to do X, Y, and Z? It really didn't result in anything other than resources, and maybe some people knew and some people didn't know. Enters a wonderful group of people, along with Sean and Noah, Christine, and others, Kimberly, Dixon, the DSA. DSA came in and said, okay, we see what's happening over here. They did outreach to different churches in the area. The West End was contacted. Glenwood Lutheran Church was notified. And through that, we started having ongoing meetings with the tenants so that we could figure out what our next move was going to be, because we weren't going to take this line down and we weren't going to pack up our things and just move. So in short, we sent a letter to Dennison giving them 7 days to respond to us. And the thing that I highlighted here was when you go to the Dennison website, you know, they're such a wonderful company. They say through our integrated platforms, we offer consistent and transparent measures. We are dedicated to providing the resident the experience and upholding our promise of delivering quality, unique, and exceptional customer service to our residents. Bunch of crap, okay? Period. And if you go on their website or you Google them or Reddit them, whatever you want, you will see that Executive Towers in Toledo, Ohio is not the only property that is having the same issues that we are having. You know, Warrensville, you know, I mean, there are places, you know, even in Annapolis and places that they are property managing that you go through the comments. People are talking about leaks. People are talking about work orders. People are talking about things not being fixed. People are talking about not getting their security deposits back, wrongfully evicted, just a wide variety of things. So this is not just an Executive Towers scenario. This is a Dennison property. I mean, some of you may recall maybe about 1.5 years before all this transpired, the whole Beacon Place situation. I mean, that was basically the same thing. Repairs, charging for water and sewage that is against the law. It's a law on the books for the city of Toledo that you can't resell water, but yet I pay sewage and water as inclusive of my rent. Okay, so just tremendous practices that are not legal and really are not just confined to executive towers. So when you think about what's happening at executive towers, you know, I had to widen my scope on what exactly I'm fighting about. Am I fighting just for my home, or am I fighting for predatory property management companies like Dennison Management? This is the laundry list. Roof, leakage, evidence of black mold, unkept areas, the pool. I love on the website they advertise the pool as a wonderful amenity. The pool's been closed for 3 years, okay? The pool is a wreck. The pool needs to be fixed. The pool is cracked, okay? None of that has happened, but yet it's amenity that's supposedly part of my rent that I don't even have the ability to enjoy. And so them saying and telling people, oh, you got a wonderful pool, is just a bunch of crap. The infestation, security, the lighting, rainwater, the dumpster, the steps, unattended debris, and unlawful billing of utilities, and then the fact that I have to pay you for you to notify me how much my rent is. You know, that's like telling T-Mobile, when you tell me how much I owe you, make sure you tack another $15 on there so that I know that you told me so that I can pay my bill. I mean, these are ridiculous things. And of course, after we sent that, let me just show you what I'm talking about. This is actual mold in somebody's apartment, the top left corner. That person was living in those conditions. That is the heater. That is the air conditioning unit. What you see in the blue is the fact that there was actually a tenant that ceiling fell on her while she was asleep. And they came in and they tarped the hole until they could get to it. But you see it's still bubbled because there's water still in that, okay? This bottom corner is the lobby area where the ceiling tiles are just, they're just they just crumble. And then you see the ceiling tile. This window here, that's evidence of black mold there. And ironically, the day that we were to meet at the library, this is the wonderful water leak that's gushing in the garage that we're paying for. We're talking about a lot of water. All that water there, that's part of my water bill. They ain't paying for it. So whatever leaks or whatever water issues or plumbing, they were passing the cost on to the tenants. So when you're losing so many gallons of water an hour, you know, who's going to pay for that? Nobody's going to pay for that, but they want the tenants to pay for it. This is the sink in the laundry room. They built a new laundry room and they never took out the sinks and they never cleaned it. This here is water tile, again, that's dripping in the hallways and in the vent room. This is somebody's light socket. That water was actually coming out of her light socket because of the leakage that was on the front. And then, of course, you have the doorbell. So these are the kind of conditions that over a period of time were happening. And then it's just like the floodgates broke up. And I think that's when Dennison realized they couldn't put a Band-Aid on an open wound. I think they realized they were either going to have to cut their losses. And according to management, the reason why we got the August 4th letter was because plumbers told them that the building would fall down because of all the water. Isn't that what she said, Sean? Plumbers, the water would shoot for the safety of us.
I think that's what she said at the last.
At the last minute, yeah, the safety. So it was a safety issue because of water. All a bunch of crap, okay? Just trying to figure out how they are going to get out from under. They do have a predatory reputation for going and managing, draining, making sure the owner makes money, and then moving on and trying to sell it to the next buyer. So all of these kind of things were happening in contention. So then we waited. Of course, we didn't get a response. They didn't follow our timeline. Of course, now bear in mind, every single step along the way, I want to be very, very grateful and thankful to the press. Channel 13 and Channel 11 have been beasts covering what's been going on, as well as the blade. So then this is when we decided, okay, so what is our next move? And that's when we did a community rally. And we were there. Blade came out and covered. You see some of the signs that we made. Denison will kill you with mode. Broken promises. Shame on you. Now bear in mind, while all this is going on, the day of August the 4th that we got our letter, we went from 102 tenants, and current day right now we're down to 35. Okay? Now, a lot of those tenants, I don't know the great percentages, but bear in mind that not only did certain people, market rate people, start putting their rent in escrow, HUD abated their money. So HUD demanded that anybody that was Section 8 or had a voucher would have to be out either by October, the end of October, the end of November, the end of December. So there was a lot of turnover. Right now at the 35 numbers that there are right now, there are 20 of us that are left paying market rate. There are 15 that need to be out between the end of this month and the end of December. So we've gone from 102 tenants to 20 tenants technically, which might be 19 because one person is leaving because of health reasons. And Denison wants to whine to us that they're losing an average of $30,000 to $40,000 a month. Well, I know how to do math. If an average person was paying you $1,000 a month and 30 of them moved out, there's your 30,000. I mean, you precipitated this. You were the reason for this. Instead of fixing stuff, you basically thought everybody was going to cut and run. And then I guess you really didn't realize that other people were going to put their rent in escrow and begin suing you, like I'm suing for the water bills and the utilities, and so are others, that you weren't going to suffer a loss while you're having to fix the building. So it was just a very ludicrous conversation to have. Any questions or comments before I move on?
If I could make one comment, Oksana, the president, I made the observation that when she pulled up to the last meeting, she was wearing an outfit matching her Tesla, if that's who this person is. So, just to give you an idea,
There's so many things in that statement to unpack.
It was just a bad look. She came full dolled up, and these residents are suffering, and that was my first impression of her, was just watching her get out of her Tesla and then come in and be unprepared. And she saw the press, and the first thing she asked is if she should have her lawyer there. And that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. Sick. Yeah.
So, what has transpired? Where are we at now? So there's a small group of us, which includes Noah Woods, Mike and Logan from DSR, Sean, Kimberly, and myself, where we've been meeting consistently to find out what our next steps are. We decided that maybe as we figure out what our capacities are, what our next steps are towards moving to a tenants union or how to go about it, that we would form a watchdog group. Mike has got the Facebook up, and what we're doing is we're going to be doing this on November the 15th, where we're going to be rolling out our Facebook page as a Toledo Tenants Watchdog Group, so we can start getting feedback from people all over Toledo, from tenants that, are a chance to air their issues, air their concerns, so we can actually figure out what the pulse is. We know what the pulse is because when we started this fight at Executive Towers, I had people reach out to me from Beale, Vistula, Savage. I mean, we can go down the list. We even had people from Vistula attend our rally wanting to know how we could help them. So, while we're trying to save and preserve our own homes, we're realizing that this isn't isolated, and of course we know it's not isolated. What happened with Greenbelt and what happened with Ashland Manor, and what happened with, Coventry House. I mean, we can go on and on about what you're seeing in the news about what's going on with housing stock here in Toledo when it comes to Tennessee, that, we would be a broken record. But we thought we needed to get a feel for what was out there and what the interest level are. And and the hardest thing to do is organize people. It's like sometimes I laugh and say it's like herding cats, because everybody wants to at least have their own special self-interest, and they get so bogged down in their self-interest, which is not a bad thing at all, but there has to be a collective push, and there has to be a collaboration. There has to be dialogue and steps to push and what to push, with the belief that if you benefit, I'm going to benefit. I may not benefit in real time, but if this is seen to be more urgent, then my self-interest is not important right now. And that's going to be the challenge. We got to figure out how we systematically do this so we keep people engaged. It's been tough for me at Executive Towers because there's so many different mindsets of self-interest, and I'm just one person. And the daily communication I have to have with the tenants, the holding hands, the mothering, the letting them know what's happening, the trying to build capacity for them, how to gain resources, like Ari doing the box collection for those that have to move, and Pastor Chris bringing food over and things of that nature. Trying to make sure everybody's good. Trying to make sure everybody's good, and bear in mind, while I'm trying to make everybody's good, there's nothing wrong with my apartment. You literally could lift mine up out the building, which I wish I could, and move it somewhere on top of another building because I like the view. But, it's tough. And so we have to do a lot of social media outreach just for the watchdog group, keep media involved, and build a coalition, and then talk about capacity building. The Executive Towers Tenant Association right now, there's 20 of us. And even keeping those 20 engaged at times is very difficult. So we figured what we would do is, this is a perfect opportunity to use the Executive Tower situation as a stepping stone to bigger things. That we are the straw that broke the camel's back, per se. That we are the ones that, whether there's not going to be Executive Towers in the next 6 months, then this cause is still going to be constant, no matter what. We're the straw that broke the camel's back. So this is just some basic information on the fact that they did begin the roof repair. It's funny as heck. It's been raining for the last week and a half. They're up there doing the roof. I don't know how they're doing the roof when it's raining, but anyway. We're still waiting on certain things that they said. Supposedly, they keep telling the city that they're going to bring the building back to life. Now, I want to digress a minute. Everything that the city violated them on, everything that was on the news, everything building inspection and code enforcement came, the city decided not to take Denison to court because they didn't have enough. They didn't feel they had a good case. I don't know how ceilings falling down on people while they're asleep, holes in the walls with water coming through it, water coming through the electrical, basement being flooded, roof leakage, mold, common areas, cleanliness, lack of cleanliness, and the band played on. Why the city did not feel that they had enough information to file. That was probably our biggest blow, was when I got that phone call. Miss V, I got bad news. City doesn't feel they have enough to take Dennis into court. So then that's when we had to continue doing what we're doing. And we did a phone bank where we bugged the heck out of code enforcement. Jim Molnar it got to the point where he just called me and asked me to back people off because people were calling and demanding that they do things. I was like, I'm sorry, Jim, you put yourself in that position. People want answers. And so, yeah, and they're going to keep calling. They're going to keep calling. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? I said, because you guys keep wanting to blame Denison, But let's be a little pragmatic here. This is a threefold complicity. Denison is complicit. The city of Toledo is complicit, because don't tell me your problem is you don't have enough building inspectors or code enforcement operators, and that you don't know what's happening in all the buildings in the city and all that crap. Okay, one. And then HUD. Because HUD inspectors have come into this building and some of these apartments, the pictures I showed you, and passed them. So this is a three-prong argument for who's responsible. And we did campaign with HUD to let them know, and LMHA. I'm not on the best person list right now about the fact that they're complicit. And I keep telling Venice and Jim, city's to blame. And now that the elections are over, I know who else I need to target. Who's to blame? Yes, it's Denison, but when you keep affording the opportunity for out-of-state landlord and property manager companies, people that don't have a vested interest in the city of Toledo housing stock, that they're just here to sip up the money and go, then that's an issue. So you're all complicit. Right now, you're all on my target list. It's not just Denison. So what we decided to do was find out what's next and move this fight citywide and talk about a citywide tenants union. Now first I want to get rid of all the myths. The number one myth is that tenant unions are just out to fight and go against landlords. That is the biggest myth that there is. Now, does that happen? Of course, if landlords are not doing their due diligence, but it's more of a collaborative effort to at least get to the table to talk about tenant issues, repairs, rent control, things of that nature, even work to do some collective bargaining, to give a unified voice to the tenants that would hopefully engage you in getting better tenants. And the fact that the tenants now respect where they live because you respect their tenancy and vice versa. So there are a lot of different myths that I really wanted that, because when we first started talking about doing it citywide, I had a couple city officials who I'll let remain nameless right now that basically said, oh my God, that's not a good idea. Not right now. The landlords are going to have an issue. I really don't really give a damn about the landlords at this onset, because it wouldn't be a us and them if they didn't create the scenario. I didn't jump into this fight by myself. I didn't go down the street looking to pick a fight. So there has to be a certain degree of obligation and a certain degree of commitment and responsibility, in short. So these are just some of the myths that a lot of people take into account about tenant unions. They force landlords to strike or have a negative impact on property owners. Not if you're a property owner that's doing the right thing. This doesn't just take rocket scientists to think this out. If I'm a property owner that's not doing the right thing, then yeah, the last thing I need is a tenants union, okay? But, the reality is, while we're not the same as labor unions, we have, our main purpose of a tenants union is to be able to negotiate, to talk, for better living conditions, and as opposed to developing rent strikes that have taken across many cities. Probably since COVID, there's been a very upsurge in tenant strikes where landlords, and we're not talking about the traditional put your rent in escrow. There are a lot more housing courts that are a lot more aggressive or stay out the way of some of these tenants unions that have been more and more effective. It's basically letting you know that you spend the one thing that you worry about every month is how I'm going to pay my rent or how I'm going to pay my mortgage. And there should come with that a certain degree of respect, period. You're not doing them a favor, nor are they doing you a favor. Housing is a right. It's a basic human right. And so I think that's where people get lost in the sauce again with their own, ideas about my own self-interest. The landlord has his self-interest, the tenant has their self-interest, and again, herding cats concept. These are just some pictures of tenant groups across the country. There are a lot of tenant groups across the country. One of the most successful one is in Kansas City. They have done a lot of collective bargaining. They have brought a lot of new books, new rules on the books in terms of eviction clauses and fighting just cause evictions and giving out resources and etc. The other one is Ann Arbor, very, very successful in ensuring that, rent hikes and conditions in certain apartments were taken care of. The one I like the most is in Bozeman. I read up on them. They literally put in a mayor. They didn't like the incumbent. They rallied against him, and they did some organizing around housing stock and changes in housing law and fighting for tenants' rights and rent control. Very, very successful there. So these are just some pictures of people that are basically fighting for the right. And I love the fact that it says that every tenant deserves a union. Providence, Rhode Island, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Brooklyn, and New Jersey. So, what is a tenants union? It's pretty basic. So, it's an organized organization made up of renters. And we don't only want to think of tenants unions in terms of just apartment dwelling. We need to take into account that there are people that are renting houses, and those are tenants too. So it is a very broad spectrum of still fighting things like, unfair evictions, better housing conditions, and etc. Because just because I'm in executive towers with those issues doesn't mean that there aren't people that are renting houses that have the same issues, or in duplexes, or etc. So the tenants concept is very broad. They do their collective power, they do negotiation, they advocate, they provide resources. Like in our case here in Toledo, of course, ABLE, LAWO, Fair Housing are already very viable resources that we have to help tenants know what their rights are. Sean and I were talking about at some point, maybe doing some tenant education classes and, what are your rights as a tenant, because a lot of people you just go in. I mean, we have the rights, and unions can help impact the rights. When that landlord puts that lease in front of you and says, okay, sign, my lease is 52 pages long, okay? And all you want is, yay, my credit cleared, yay, I got the keys, gave my deposit, I'm going to sign on the dotted line. But you don't know that there are key elements within that lease that can be negotiated or shouldn't be in there at all, okay? And so once you're lock, stock, and barrel, then you pretty much have subjected yourself to whatever they choose and choose not to do. Even certain minuscule conditions about how you get your security deposit back and all of that kind of stuff. The funny thing about Denison was when I've been there 5.5 years, and when Denison called me down to do my lease the first year they took over, and was like, okay, here you go, sign. I was like, I'm taking this upstairs. I need to read through this, and I need to highlight. Were there things in it that I didn't like that I called to their attention and went on as a matter of record. But now as I look back on it with 20/20 hindsight, if I had belonged to a union or to some kind of association or collaboration, there could have been opportunity for me to fight those certain clauses that I locked myself in when I signed that lease. And this is just, again, what they fight for. Of course, rent control. We don't have that. I think rent control should be a national thing. I don't think certain cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York should just be privy to rent control. I think given this day and age and post-COVID, with the way the housing stock has gone down and in terms of rentals, Everything that's being redeveloped is more condo oriented. I think with the aging population and prices going up and people's pays not going up with them, that there needs to be some clear definitions of what it means to be based off your income or market rate. And like Glenn and I were just saying, there's no market anymore. I don't know what market rate is, and based on income, and what does that mean? It actually doesn't mean anything. There's this mindset that you should just go ahead and count on 1/3 to 2/3 of your income being for a place to live. That's ridiculous. And that percentage goes up. So, there's certain things that people need to be advocating now, particularly in this time and age, that we can't afford. It had nothing to do with the government shutting down, nothing to do with nothing, because without putting any stoppage to mindsets of landlords and developers and homeowners that are renting and etc. If you don't have the ability to stop the brakes, it's just going to go up and up and up. And then there's always that other end of the spectrum is, then what do we do if we are homeless? We ain't taking care of the homeless now. So, so there's that, that mindset. We were talking about living paycheck to paycheck. I've been working since I was 16. I can't remember a time I didn't work paycheck to paycheck. I don't know what that is, not to work paycheck to paycheck. So, but can you imagine with the aging population and everything, that there's a lot of things that we need to be putting the brakes to in terms of our aging population, senior housing, rent controls, what actually does the market look like? As opposed to thinking, oh, I'm going to make the city the most economically development city and we're going to bring jobs and everything. How are you going to bring jobs if you don't have housing stock? How are you going to bring jobs and tell your citizens you're going to do anything for them if you're pricing them out of the market that you're developing because of your new development? I mean, this vicious circle just keeps going on and on and on, and it's time to put the brakes on a lot of stuff. So they're structured differently. Some are structured, tenant unions can be done by building. For example, if all of Vistula got together and said, we want to form a tenants union, then we could go in and organize them. They would form what we call an association. Executive Towers would have their association. Beacon Place might have their association. And then what we would do is members or the organizers or the lead person of those associations would belong to the tenants union, and the tenants union would provide the more organizing capacities, coalition building, fundraising, work on policy, and etc. And then there's another premise just to do it citywide. We are working on that right now. If anybody has any ideas and would like to talk to Sean, myself, or Kim, Noah, or Mike, or Logan, your ideas or your involvement, because this job is not going to be an easy job to do. I think the coalition building part of this is going to be a given, because I do have churches and organizations that are like, yes, because their people are being impacted. But in terms of how it's going to be structured, I don't want, and nor do we want collectively, for us to make the determination on how this union should be structured. And so, we are looking for input. We're looking to putting together a steering committee. We are looking to figure out how to build capacity where some of you could come in, or if you know people that are in housing units that need help, how we could go in and help organize them, and so on. So just food for thought. I'll just throw it out there right now. But there is a law that was done in 1972 that allowed a lot of protections of tenant unions. It was, to make sure that the labor laws were uniformed across the country. It also, again, stays on the landlord to improve the housing quality. And it worked to establish a uniformed law among states that would adopt it. Do I like when national laws come out and then they say, well, then yeah, your state has to adopt it. That's just too much of a loophole hole there. But they did revise it later on to be inclusive of just evictions, domestic violence, reasons, legitimate reasons for breaking your lease, and etc. But just to give you an idea, this is what it looks like, okay? So, the red states, and I'm sure most of you would look at that and go, yeah, that's typical. The red states, they're not against tenant unions, they just don't acknowledge them, okay? You know, that you would have to go one more step in your organizing abilities and etc. and fighting with local politics or statewide politics for that. So you're not, there's no retaliation, but potentially there could be if tenants wanted to form a union, but they just haven't really adopted the Uniform Act. Your green states have what they call multi-levels. And that would make sense, you know, because at different levels, I mean, they do acknowledge and they support, but they have what they call statewide federations or regional federations where they have really organized to the level that not only do they have a bunch of associations or many tenant unions like in a state like California, but they're now have formed federations. So this just gives everything else in orange, we're good to go. Okay, and everything in orange has tenants unions, not necessarily in every single state, every single city, and every single state, but that still is a very much great representation. The problem with trying to figure out how many tenant unions is that there's really nobody keeping those stats, you know, of how many unions are in the United States, because a lot of them are doing it basically through basic community organizing and grassroots efforts. They don't rise to the level of necessarily becoming an association or a union, but may potentially move to that. So as you could see, I mean, even in Alaska and in Hawaii, that there is very strong representation. And this is just basically the revision of that Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. They did that revision in 2015 about the domestic violence protection, security deposits are being more governed, retaliatory conduct, and the obligations and remedies for when a landlord or tenant breaches the lease. So these are very viable acts, and this is what the foundation of tenant unions are based on, is this criteria. So just a quick idea of either each one builds their own association or they do individual representation. And that's pretty much where we're at. So we land back where we are, kind of like where we started. And what are the next steps? Do I see executive towers being executive towers once again? I don't. If I wanted to be pragmatic, I don't believe they're going to do what they say they're going to do. I do know they just hired a property manager. I don't know what for. They can't lease to anybody because they haven't fulfilled the obligations, but they did hire a property manager. I met her yesterday. I do know that they're fixing the roof. I don't know where everything else comes off. They don't want to do air quality tests. No, they don't want to do it. Nobody does air quality tests because every building has mold. Okay?
I mean, to an extent, that's true.
Yeah.
Like, there's mold outside, there's mold. But what they test for is to see if the interior levels are higher than the exterior levels.
But all that water, though, there has to be.
Oh, good lord, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I was told yesterday. I'm trying to think of what else I was told. I mean, you know, for me, it just goes in one ear and out the other. The whole premise at this point is I've got to keep everybody engaged, and I have to build coalitions. I have to build opportunities for people to understand that the next apartment building or property is going to be in the news just as fast as this one was. This is the ongoing trend all of a sudden. And with this new slate of politicians we just elected, you know, it's time to be a lot more responsive to what they're not doing than what they are doing. And so with that being said, I'll take any questions. Sean, do you have anything you want to add to anything I've said?
Yeah, let me just say that I heard a quote once that there are two fundamental choices in life: to accept conditions as they exist, or to accept the responsibility for changing them.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to critique some of the existing resources in Toledo, including some of the nonprofit firms and some of our politicians, they're very intent on explaining things as they are and working within things as they are. I want to credit you and others in the DSA who have stepped up to say, the options we have are not enough. We are accepting the responsibility for changing conditions so that there are real options and decisions to go forward. I think we need more of that kind of thinking. It really upset me at the meeting that was held when Denise Williams tried to say, well, you know, there's nothing the city government's going to do, so you guys just need to figure out if you're going to move or what.
Right.
That to me was somebody saying, this is conditions as they exist. I have no interest in changing it. I don't know how to change it because I'm not a very good politician. That's what I heard. I'm sorry. And I think we need to have politicians who say, I can explain to you things as they exist. I can agree with you that they're wrong, and I'm going to work with you to change them. I don't know the last time I've met a city council person who really did that last third thing. I know there's a few people who try. I'm meeting with one tomorrow morning, Christina and I. But I get frustrated always hearing about the injustices that take place, and I'm tired of politicians who think their job is to collect taxpayer-funded paychecks to explain to people why we can't have nice things. It's time to have politicians who understand that their job is to lead, to affect change, and stop explaining things and making excuses for how things are, and start doing the work that we're paying them to make things reasonable and workable. So that's my little soapbox. I'm going to stop there.
That's okay.
But I'm really grateful, and everything you said here was great. I know there's a lot of people here in the audience who I think hopefully you're interested in this. I would say get with Ms. V to talk about how you can get plugged in. I hear a lot that we need resources. She needs help. She needs support, even just within what she's doing with Executive Towers. But obviously this idea to go bigger and citywide is going to need a lot of help. So if you're somebody that can commit some time and support these efforts, you know who to speak to. That's it.
Thank you, Sean.
I did want to just take a moment to express appreciation for people like Garrett here, who has provided a lot of boxes for the tenants. The box drive would not be possible
Thank you.
without people like her, my friend Lola, Logan, Morgan, Ray. The list could go on. So many people that I've reached out to have really just made this possible for the tenants. So I just wanted to give them the recognition.
Yeah, and on behalf of the tenants, I thank you. It was just a strange scenario. You guys just kind of popped up on my doorstep. I looked up and there was DSA, and I was like, okay, who are these people? Okay, but it was because I love a mindset that isn't, well, I don't live there, so not my problem. You know, I looked up and there were people from all over and that were like, how can we help? How can we help? And I'm going to be honest with you, for that's very, very special. And you guys have been rocking with us every step of the way. I appreciate that.
Ms. V, two questions. One, have you had your water quality tested in the building?
No.
Okay. And then the second one is, how did LMHA get involved? You mentioned that they were
we
doing
have
things.
We have tenants. Okay, so the building is obviously comprised of various rental levels. You have the penthouse and the 12th floor, so those people obviously pay more than I would. I'm on the 10th floor. And then you have market rate based on, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. And then you have Section 8. Okay.
Okay.
And so, there was a a group, I would say probably out of the 102 tenants, I would say probably 30%, 25 to 30% were Section 8. And out of that percentage, I would say probably 15 were seniors. And out of those, they were the most impacted. They were on the second, third, and fourth floor. Some of those apartments, the water in the carpet was squishy. You just thought somebody just opened up the door and poured a water hose in there. And they were living in those conditions, okay? But your HUD inspector, your LMHA inspector, was coming in and passing the building and passing your apartment. It wasn't until it hit the fan on August the 4th that all of a sudden everybody's inspector was coming out to inspect the building. And then that's when they decided they didn't abate rent until they paid August. And then instead of turning the spigot off just like that, they abated 50% of them in September and the remaining in October. And but they gave them all, based on your voucher or your renewal, time to get out. Every single last person that has Section 8 that is remaining has to be out by December 31st. And when those people go, that's only going to leave market rate people. And out of the 102, the 60% that were market rate, they've moved. They've moved. They got out over a period of time, but they got out. And the ones, and a lot of their apartments were impacted. The 20 people that are living there now, our apartments are impacted. I mean, I don't know, some are on the 9th floor, I'm on the 10th floor, some are on the 7th floor, some are on the 12th floor. There's no rhyme or reason of the damage that occurred in that building. You know, one side of the building, another side of the building, you know. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. But there's 20 of us that don't want to move. But I don't drink the water anyway there, never have, okay? Because when I first moved in 5 years ago, I had to run it because it was brown when I first turned it on. So I buy water. Air quality and those kind of tests, I've already laid the seed with the new property manager and the district manager that was there yesterday. I'm coming after y'all on air quality and a timeline. So another letter's about to go out. You know, when they just had their big corporate meeting, I guess maybe they got bonuses or talked about all their property. But when I found out they were meeting, I sent a letter into their CFO and basically said, while y'all having a good discussion on how great the year's been, don't forget about executive towers.
Do you have any more insight on when you got that call from the city and they said we can't fight this legally, we don't have a case? Do you know why that is?
They just felt that, okay.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So this is something, I'm the housing conditions attorney at the Fair Housing Center. So I investigate housing, conditions complaints. And I've had, since I started doing this job about 3 years ago, I've found that the city of Toledo and code enforcement, they do little to nothing. They will not come into a property. They say we do not have the authority to come in. The law director for the city of Toledo is directed with all the staff that, per local and state law. So it's the entire administration. They just don't want to do anything, so they direct everyone under them not to do anything.
But they could if they wanted.
Yes,
Yes,
they
yeah.
could. But
They
it is
could,
their,
okay.
yes.
Right.
I mean, the laws
Good to know.
are pretty clear. But again, Jim Molnar, again, with these things, they say, well, we could take them to court, but then they have 60 days to fix it, and if they do this, they're gonna get 60 days more. They are just lazy. They're just lazy, and they don't want to fight for people who need help.
Do you think they're afraid of these management companies leaving?
Yeah,
are they afraid? What's
Well, the building's still gonna be there.
right? But why?
And yeah, I mean, these
Why do you
management
allow
companies,
these places to come in?
they donate a lot of money to wait. Like,
right.
they love
That's
wait.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
The other thing is too, I work with Christina at Fair Housing. So one of the things that surprised me when I first started getting calls about this on that day in August, because our phones just blew up, right? And I'm talking to this guy on the phone, I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me what? Like, I was just shocked. But what really shocked me was that the city inspected it at all. Because what we have heard from tenants in high-rises, from tenants in single-family homes, across the board, is, okay, if there's some issue, you know, one guy called me the other day, the water line's broken up the street, there's no water coming into his house. Okay, he should call code enforcement. Code enforcement, they will call him and say, well, we're not allowed to come in. Your job is literally to inspect.
And that's why we have such deteriorating conditions everywhere, is because
Yes.
there's absolutely no oversight by local government. And you can see other cities, the way they operate in Akron and Dayton and Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati. They have perfectly functioning code enforcement that does the job. And, you know, there have been studies and recommendations within the city that they need to beef up code enforcement, have more employees, and based on that, they cut the employees in half instead.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we did a FOIA request, like, quite a few years ago, for the Department of Neighborhoods, code enforcement, their workflow, right? Like, okay, so you call in, you have a complaint against your landlord, blah, 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 something about, you know, the house isn't right. Okay, so it goes to this person, and then it goes to this person, and then the case is closed.
No
Like,
follow-up. No
There's
follow-up with the person that's
nowhere,
complaining.
anywhere that it says the issue was investigated, the issue was resolved. It's just case closed.
And having worked for two mayors, one of them which Kim and I lovingly call our thug, Mr. Finkbeiner, that didn't happen during those times. You called in a complaint, if he had to, he would be standing in front of the apartment
Put it on.
building, okay?
Yeah.
He made sure, if he had to ride with a building inspector, he rode with a building inspector. Trust me, if the man would be out helping the firefighters fight fire when he should be at home in
Well, he did
bed.
citizens arrest, remember?
Yes, yes, I mean, yeah, and so we had those things that were happening. People were responded to, and or held accountable by the mayor. I mean, you know, and same with Jack. I mean, Jack Ford. You know, I worked for both. I worked for Cardi twice, and Jack, well, of course, one time. But the complaints. I mean, Cardi had a Dirty Dozen billboard. I don't know how many of y'all remember that. But he would buy the largest billboards in the main thoroughfares and list all the Dirty Dozen properties. And you would be surprised at the number of property owners that would call into the mayor's office trying to figure out how they could get off the list. And it was like, well, you got tenants complaining about this, tenants complaining about this, you're not cutting the grass, you're not shoveling the snow. You do that and we watch you for 60 days, we'll take you off the list. It was almost like he was organizing and going up against, even though he was mayor. You don't have that now. That has gotten extremely complacent. What I was specifically told by Venice and Monar was, not only did they not feel they had enough to take him to court, but they are in communication with us every day. Now, the analogy I gave them, I said, a bill collect, I can call somebody I owe a bill to every day. Hi, the check's in the mail. Call them 2 days later. The check's in the mail, but the check ain't in the mail.
Right.
Okay? So just because they're calling and keeping you apprised of what they're doing, and you decide, oh, they're the good guys, they're really trying, was basically what I was told, that they're keeping in touch with us. And I thought that was the most ludicrous thing I had ever heard of.
Yeah, you're right, it is.
So if I could just say, this is the very definition of a political issue. It is a decision, it is a political decision of whoever is the mayor to have their administration do this. And the frustrating thing as somebody who works in this is that we know it's a political issue. And there's a lot of people pissed off about slumlord conditions. They get pissed. They have no idea that this is a political decision. Never came up fucking once, as far as I know, during this whole election season.
It didn't.
Because we don't have a very deep civic knowledge or engagement. There's a lot of people who want to help, and there's a small handful of people who know that this is a political problem. But this is why we need some kind of body going out there and educating people like this needs to be an issue. There are things you can do even outside an election year
Right.
to pressure a mayoral administration, say, no, this is your decision. too many people have accepted, because the mayor will say, well, we can't do it. And for enough people, I don't know, the mayor said it must be true.
Yeah.
Bullshit. Mayor's liable to fucking
And he
die.
said that, he's gone on record in terms of executive towers and basically said there's nothing he can do
But
about
we need a
that.
lot of people who are informed going up and saying, bullshit, that's not true, do your fucking, sorry for all the profanity, I just get really wound up. Do your
You
fucking
and me
job,
both.
mayor, whoever the fuck it is. And we need council people who are willing to do that. And we need citizens who are gonna tell the council people, if you don't do it, we will, and we're gonna do it nastier. So pick your fucking poison. That's just my opinion. I'll say
Right.
that.
And Venice, when we were talking about doing a tenants union just for executive towers, and at a meeting, I made a comment, yeah, we'll probably end up having to go citywide. She was like, oh, no, that's not a good idea. I just started laughing.
Yeah, yeah.
I just started laughing. Yeah, well, okay, I'll tell you now. Oh, yeah, Vandish, you're right, but no, I'm coming after you.
What city council committee does tenants union falls under?
There's a housing committee, I know that Nick Comives and Teresa Gaddis are on it, I'm not sure who else.
Oh, great.
And they're both, I mean, Teresa Gaddis is I think, a great partner.
Oh, yeah.
We're meeting with her tomorrow to talk about potential rental inspection legislation with the city.
Well, you make sure you let her know that at Wade High School today, a lot of her constituency weren't really happy about her. So she ain't doing something right.
And, well, the reason why I ask is, I would say, one of the first steps you should do is, once the new council gets in, flood them. The first day, I mean, they have public comments for the thing. I would get as many people as you can in there, and one by one saying, we're looking at housing, we're watching you, we expect this, and we're going to be watching you. And for those that are in districts, you only got 2 years left. I did a video on to endorse the mayor of Oregon on how over in Oregon, the mayor at a meeting one time that I was at said, I asked him, what do you say to the people, because they had housing that was being built for $350,000, and then they had an apartment complex going up for $2,200. And I said to him, I said, what do you say to the people that are making between $30,000 and $70,000? Because that apartment complex, just the low end, to be rent, so you're not cost burden on rent, you got to make $80,000 a year, and that's 1/3 of the cost. And so he said, and this is a quote, we don't want those people in our cities. And that's talking about your teachers, that's talking about your first
responders.
Yeah, that's talking about your entry-level nursing, that's talking about your entry-level police officers, firefighters, everything. And I don't have the ego or the hubris to say, that I did something, but he lost 2-1.
Yeah, that's good.
And so, and my commercial got over 100 views.
Oh, yeah?
And yeah, so it was like, and so I think there's a nerve here that we can push, and we can push hard.
I agree.